I recently bought two locomotives. One was a used King George V from Hornby, and the second was a brand new Bachmann Class 43 warship. But one of them arrived with a fault. And which one do you think it was? Hi, welcome back to Chadwick Model Railway. I'm Charlie. Now I wanted a couple of additions to Chadwick, and I wanted them fitted with sound, and I was fortunate enough to receive a gift, and it's a Bachmann Class 43 sound fitted Loco from TMC, the Modelling Centre. And what I asked the Modelling Centre to do was to fit ESU version 5 lock sound and for deluxe weathering. And I mean, it's an absolute beauty, as you can see. However, it didn't arrive in perfect condition because, as you can see here, one of the cab lights works and the other one doesn't. So what should I do? Should I box it back up and send it to TMC, or should I cut the body off and have a little look? Well, clearly we're going to take it apart to see what exactly is going on. But it is an incredible piece of weathering, and I take my hat off to TMC. They do make an exceptional job of what they specialise in. And this little one here is obviously King George V. Now, she returned as a preserved loco to mainline running in 1971. She was the first one to come back, and she was restored by a team of guys up at, I think it's Bulmer's Cider, and the Pullman cars that she pulled were actually named after the restoration crew's wives, which I thought was a charming addition. Anyway, so I wanted a steam loco to run properly on Chadwick, you know, within its time zone of 1968, 1974-ish. So King George V will make that appearance, let's say. So I'm going to fit a Locksound version 5 chip into this one as well. And Richard Croft from Road and Rails has offered me several speaker alternatives and some advice, so we'll set about that. And also, I'm always worried about this one because the tenders are so light, so I'll actually weigh the tenders, and in the fullness of time I may fit added weights, because I just think that these things need more weight because she's got pickups on all three bogies. So we'll have a little look at that. Right, let's set about the task. I can't emphasize enough how good the weathering is from the Modelling Centre on this loco. It is absolutely outstanding. But there are a couple of issues. Obviously, I didn't realise that these roof vents existed, because if I had known, I would have asked the Modelling Centre to fit them prior to doing their weathering. So what am I going to do? Well, I think in the fullness of time I shall weather these on the sprue and try and get a reasonable match, and then fit them up myself. The last thing I want to do is fit them, glue them in, and then start going over all the good work that I've paid for from the Modelling Centre and make a complete pig's ear, let's say, of the roof weathering. Obviously, when I take the shell off, the body off, what I intend to do is sort out this light. One of them doesn't work, as we've seen, but why it doesn't work, I've no idea. Hopefully, perhaps the Modelling Centre haven't connected the roof light properly when they took the shell off, the body off, to do the weathering. And whilst I'm in there, I intend to swap out that speaker for one of these. This is a Megabass speaker which measures 25 by 7 millimeters, and it was recommended by Richard Croft of Road and Rails. I have a good relationship with Richard. He comes up with some great ideas, and thank you very much, Richard, for steering me in the right direction and supplying me with a couple of speakers, and another two, which we'll see later on when I start on my King class. So if we run it as it is now, and it's on my rolling road, and all I've done is connected the rolling road to my tracks with a couple of jumper cables. So now I'll remove my lapel mic, we'll run this up and listen to the sound we get with the existing speaker. Now the chip inside this is an ESU lock sound version 5. I'm an ESU kind of guy, I do like theirs, and I tend to sort of specialise the wrong term, but I always lean towards ESU, and I understand how some people lean towards Lens or towards Zimmo, because that way if you stay with one particularly good brand, you know the foibles of their decoders. I also have an ESU programmer, which is very useful for remapping and that sort of thing. So what am I going to do? If we do the sound checks first, then take the cover off, find out why the light doesn't work. I'm not too sure if I've got any crew to fit at the same time. We'll have a look at that. Whip the cover off, change the speaker, refit it, and then we'll do another sound check and see if it's improved at all. And here you can see the box details. It's obviously a Bachmann 32-067, which has then been deluxe weathered by the modelling centre. And this is the piece of paper that was supplied to the TMC along with the version 5 lock sound decoder from Lego Man Biffo, detailing what functions have been fitted to that sound decoder. I must confess I have had better instruction sheets. Now before we flash it up, it's worth noting that this is a Digitrax DT602, which I believe goes up to functions 28, whereas this is the old DT400, which only goes up to 12. And clearly technology has moved on, so is the cost, really, hasn't it? So let's flash this little baby up, and hopefully you can hear my voice as well as the sounds from the warship. Right, so if I go back now to sound on, which should be 1. So you hear the first engine start up, and then you hear the second one join it. Horn, lovely. Lower horn, but sadly there isn't a dual horn, which I would have expected, but hey ho. Dispatcher's whistle. Sorry, finger trouble. Bit quiet, but there we go. Driver's door, does it work now? No, it's an entirely different sound completely, isn't it? So I've no idea what that is. And to be perfectly honest, that isn't the only oddity about this sound profile. Right, so let's get it underway. So this goes up to speed 99, so let's take it up to say 30. Now warships were never throaty really, they don't have some big pulsing deep bass noise, but I do quite like that. That's as I would expect it, but hopefully we can change that with a better speaker to give it a bit more bass to it. One of my favourites is always flange squeal, and that's on 9. And that's just as I would expect it, to be perfectly honest. Detonator is a new thing for me on F18, so let's go there. 18. And it says it's a 3-bang stop warning. Well, it's not, it's just one muffled bang. So that's not quite as publicised. And the strange things is things like on 13, there's some sound which I'm unsure what it is. And then also on 23, and on 24 there are sounds, but again they're not listed on the guidance. If you remember the cab lights, let's just bring the speed back down again. And it coasts, the sound of it coasting in is actually quite nice. And Oh, and there go the brakes. Lovely. Now the cab lights, which I had the issue with, was on 19, but when I press 19, you get a quiet relay sound, and obviously this light comes on, but not the other one. And if I shut the little beastie down, which is a good rundown, because it's not one of these locos that suddenly comes to an abrupt stop. The volume goes off quite nicely. Now, as usual, when I dismantle, I like to do it on a table which is well lit, and I have this soft blanket because when I drop the screws they don't bounce on the floor and I spend the rest of my life looking for them. I've got my Loco and one of these soft foam cradles from Pico. What do you call it? An Optivisor, decent set of screwdrivers, and these are available in the Show More tab if you're interested. And of course the Destructions from Bachmann, which state that the body is held on by 2 screws. I've also got my speaker nearby, so we'll whip those screws out and see what's inside. Ooh, exciting. So the instructions say that there are 2 screws, and they are here and here, so we shall whip those out. I imagine they're crosshead screws. Yes, they are. So we'll undo those 2. And then hopefully they should fall out. Oh, there's one. Oh, anyway, there's the lid coming off. So let's get rid of the cradle a moment. And hopefully you can see here there is a broken wire, completely broken off. How? Heaven only knows. And I noticed with the speaker that we already have the Megabass speaker installed, so clearly we're not going to improve on that. Now I'm sure you recall that when I took the body shell off, only one screw fell out, which is quite interesting really, because the other one is here. And if I zoom in as close as I can with this camera, hopefully you can see that there is the head of the screw and here is the broken cable. So what's happened is, sadly, when TMC put this back together, this cable has been trapped between the top of this casting and the boss in which the screw goes into. And obviously when they've tightened the screws up, they've snapped the cable. So what we need to do really is to reconnect this cable without making too much of a balls of it, let's say, and put it back together. It's also noteworthy that there are these cable guides along here. So for some reason, these cables are not in these grooves, because these grooves here will fit against the bottom of the cab area, and it's the same at both ends. So clearly these cables will be stressed by not being in their correct routing sort of thing. So that's how they should be, is in these little grooves, like so. Anyway, just another sort of note if you've got one of these, because you know these could you could end up damaging these cables by having them outside of these little channels. Now these little connector blocks just pull out in a case of putting your nails either side and just easing them up. There doesn't seem to be a locking catch on them like on the Helgen ones that I did last week. Now on closer inspection, hopefully you can see that there's actually a little crosshead screw in there, and what I'm hoping is if I take that out, the LED will slide out, and therefore I can do my soldering away from this body shell, because the last thing I want to do is scratch up some of the beautiful work that the modelling centre's done. So if I unscrew that, and what could go wrong? Give that a little yank. No, I don't think that's going to do it. I think that it is actually put in and screwed in before the cab mechanism is installed. What I shall try and do is remove this cab mechanism and see how I get on with that. I think that's probably the next step, is to get this out. It sort of seems loose. Anyway, we'll see. Well, after a little bit of fiddling and pulling at these sides, you can see that the whole cab structure sort of unclips. So it just needs to be gently removed. And there we are. A little bit of cab detail here. Hopefully you can see that. So back into the Loco now, and we can see in here that there is a little circuit board, and then the wires coming off. But this rear bulkhead is keeping this circuit board in. So we'll see if we can remove this rear bulkhead, and therefore I can get to the soldering a little easier. I'm just so intent on keeping everything away from this body shell to make sure that I don't scratch it. Yeah, we seem to have some success. There's a little locating stud. There we go. There are these little studs on either side, and if you pull the body shell apart, then that's allowed to come out. And then we're just left with this. And now I can do a little bit of soldering away from the body shell. And there you can see exactly what's gone on. Okay, progress. Brand new Loco, and we're absolutely taking it to bits. Marvellous. Now clearly I don't want to ruin my lovely blankets. I've put on a cutting mat, and if you don't know what you want the kids to buy for Christmas, and you haven't got a pair of these wire cutters, then please get them to Google this number. I think it's from RS Components. They are absolutely brilliant, but as you'd expect, they're not cheap. Now, so I need to cut back some of this, and this is a tiny little cable. I'm not too sure even if we can zoom in on this. Let's have a look. Anyway, come back in here with these, and I want to cut off a couple of millimeters, and then hopefully you can see how useful, let's say, these wire strippers are. Same on the other one. Obviously we're going to shorten this cable a bit because there's going to be an overlap with the solder, and all I'm going to do then is try to solder these two together. I'll try and clamp them up in a minute and solder them together. So just a little bit of solder on the ends of these cables to tin them. And then hopefully just pop them together. And hopefully they will hold. Give them a little tug. And it appears to be okay. Obviously it's about 1/4 of an inch, or I don't know, 5 millimeters shorter now because of the overlap. So a little bit of tape and that should be okay. So there we are, just a little bit of red tape around there. If you haven't got one of these things, they're known as a helping hand. You can get it from squirestools.com. They're about £6 and they are brilliant because they give you a hand, really. Yeah. Says what it does on the tin. Right, time to start refitting these. Now before we start the reassembly, it was just worth mention that on this little rear bulkhead, all that was painted was actually this wheel, which I imagine is a manual brake wheel, but I picked out some of the other lumps, as it were, with a drop of paint, crewed up the cab, and also picked out a few highlights here with a drop of dark brown paint, and obviously fitted these figures. I've glued these in with Araldite because I've found in the past that I don't know, with super glue and things tend to be quite brittle, so I tend to use Araldite on my figures. They're not the finest bit of painting you've ever seen, but hey, they do the job. So let's refit the miniature circuit board with the LED, and then get these figures back in the cab. So much the same as the strip down, really, isn't it? Just noteworthy, I do magnetise the end of these screwdrivers because obviously it keeps the screw in place. So I pop that in there. When I figure out which hole it is, there's two holes, and apparently it's the back hole. Looking at the other side, it's the back hole that we screw it into. Sort of hold it in place with my finger, and then hopefully just wind that into place, not too tight. And there's my repaired little lead. Next thing to pop in is the bulkhead. And if you can see in here, there are two tiny little recesses where the bulkhead clips into. So hopefully by pushing this in vertically, that should find oops, no, that's not it. Never as easy as you think, but it's in now. There's a couple of lugs, one on either side, and then there's a groove for it to bed itself into at the bottom. But hopefully with the extra detail now painted on, when you sort of look into the cab, which you might be able to see later on, there's a little bit more interest on this after bulkhead. There's got two grooves actually, which I've noticed. There's a groove here and on the other side, and there's a corresponding little slit on the inside of it. You can see that little slit here. Whoops. A little slit here. So hopefully that'll just fall in place. Yeah, right. Oh, well, I'll be blowed. And there we go. Hopefully you can see my little men. And perhaps the detail on the bulkhead behind. I'm not too sure whether you can see the detail on the dash, but I did put a little bit in there as well. So now it must be time to put it back together. And there's the speaker, and I noticed when I took it apart that one of the fans had been removed, so I know that it goes that way around. And I also noticed, as I mentioned earlier, that some of these cables were being pinched, so hopefully they're out of the way now. So now all I need to do is reconnect these cables. And the only thing that scares me about this job is scratching this beautiful weathering job, as I said in the past. So let's get that one in first. Now fancy a sneeze. Oh gosh. One here. It's that way there. Okay. Now I shall pop it on but not screw it on. Just so we can pop it up on the track and see if the lights, if the cab lights now come on. And I think it's on properly and no damage. Bit of a relief. So here we are back on the rolling road, and if I go to function 19, and we can see the cab lights come on. Unfortunately, they come on both ends as well. So on, off, on, off. There is a little bit of irony here really, because I actually may disconnect this end because this is the end that's going to be crewed up, and she will normally run with a train running this way. So if it's sat in a siding and I want this cab light set on, I probably might not want the other set on, but we'll see that in the fullness of time, because at the end of the day it's only 2 screws, and I think with her crewed up she certainly looks much better. Okay, enough of the diesel, let's move on to the steam. Now it always struck me that the tender seems very light, so what I thought the easiest thing to do was, before we kick off, we'll just weigh the tender and see what it comes in at before we start to fit anything else. Just trying to keep the weight off it, and it's coming in at about 58 grams. Now fitting sound to this little gem shouldn't be that difficult. I've got the destruction sheet from Hornby, which basically says there's 2 screws holding the cover of the tender on, and again I use this little Pico foam mat. There I've printed off the function sheet from my ESU programmer, and I've got a Lock Sound version 5 chip to go in, and the sound is from Howes. So quite straightforward really. We'll pop this into the cradle, we'll turn it over, and away we will go. So just the 2 screws to get the tender apart. And then hopefully there's my 2 screws, and as you can see I've already been here and labelled this up as a Lock Pilot Basic when I fitted the decoder in the first place. Just whip this decoder off. And then we need to set about installing the new one. Well, here we have our ESU version 5 decoder, 8-pin decoder, and it comes with an ESU sugar cube speaker and some components to make up a sound box, and obviously the more room you got, the bigger the sound chamber you can have. And these 2 nifty little speakers have been supplied to me by Richard Croft, and this 20 by 20 by 7 millimeter is an 8 ohm megabass speaker, and this little gem here is an ultra thin bass enhanced speaker, and again an 8 ohm one. So I think the best thing to do really is to make up an enclosure for this, pop this into there onto the rolling road, and do a little trial with all 3 speakers. Now we're going to carry out the test pretty much as before, except for this time I shall just be holding this speaker together rather than gluing it all up. because I don't really know what size it would be if I did it. So it's a sugar cube speaker. I've just got to keep my hands on it, and the lapel microphone is right next. So if I just start it up, I imagine you can hear a background hiss. Blast of the horn, and then we'll kick it off. Just to show you the importance of having these speakers sealed, let's just split it. That's the effect of not having an effective airtight seal behind the speaker. So if I wind the speed back down, well, let's wind it up first. And it almost goes silent at this stage as it coasts to a halt. And there we have it. So that's one speaker. Let's do the next one. Here we are this time with the 20mm by 20mm by 7mm mega bass speaker supplied by Richard from Road and Rails, and I just popped it on a little piece of foam and obviously loosely soldered onto the chip. So I'll do what I did before, hopefully, and just put the sound on, and then hopefully you can hear the background hiss of the steam as the Loco would be sat in the station. Blast of the horn, and we take it away up to speed step 15. Now up to speed 25. And to me it sounds a bit more bassy, to be perfectly honest. So I bring the speed back down, and then as you'd expect, the sound kind of shuts off almost rather than hiss, as a steam loco would as you turn the throttle back. And that's now at speed step 15. And then we take it down to 5. Then turn it down to 0. And we're left with the background hiss. And now here we are with the third speaker, the ultra thin bass enhanced 8-ohm speaker. Again, popped it on a little bit of track foam. So we'll just start the Loco up, and as you'd expect, you can hopefully hear the background hiss of the steam. Blast of the horn. and then start her up to speed 15. And now up to speed 25. And then coast it back to 15. And then bring her to a stop. And there we have it. 3 speakers, all sounding rather similar. And turning the sound off. Now, having opted for the ultra-thin bass enhanced speaker, I've stripped back the insulation both on the speaker and on the cables feeding from the decoder, and then twisted them together and popped a bit of solder on them. And now all I need to do is, with a little bit of heat shrink cable, is cover them up and, as Margaret's at work, get out her hairdryer. Knowing that the ultra-thin bass enhanced speaker was the best, what do we go for? Well, sadly that wouldn't fit, so we've gone for the 20 by 20 by 7 mega bass speaker, which I've secured into the roof of the tender with black tack, which is like blue tack but much more tacky, as it were. Not to be used near chips though, you obviously don't want to get black tack hot. Anyway, so now we can secure this cover and wrap it all up and give it a test run. Well, incredibly, I've got it all back together and I've only saved one piece. Clearly, I broke off the handbrake from inside the tender, which I shall fit at a later date, probably when I put the crew in. So, what does it sound like? Well, let's turn the sound on and bring my mic a bit closer. There's your hissing. Let's have a toot. And then bring up the speed, as usual, to 15. And then up to 25. And I hope you agree that it does sound rather nice. Of course, sound is a very personal thing, really, isn't it? You know, it's our own perception of what sounds better than something else. This speaker isn't quite as good as the that ultra thin one, but hey, given the limitations of the size inside, there's not a lot else we can do. So we'll get this one back on the tracks and welcome it to Chadwick. So to reweigh the tender after the fitting of the decoder and the speaker, and it's now coming in at about 63.5 grams. So it's still a pretty light piece of rolling stock. Well, I do hope you found that interesting and that these two fine models will make worthwhile additions to Chadwick Model Railway, and I'm sure they'll earn their keep by burning off a few miles. I mentioned Richard Croft from Road and Rails. Well, his details are in the Show More tab down below, and also the link for PayPal if you wish to donate to the channel. And of course, if you'd like to become a patron who make all this worthwhile, then please don't forget to hit that button. If you're not a subscriber, then please hit that button, and a video here and here. See you in 2 weeks. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.